That's good.
Okay, thank y'all. Sorry for the interruption here. We're going to get started with our talk on opening the door to older adult wellness through community engaged programs. Um, so I'm going to introduce myself, say a brief bit about what we're going to talk about here. And again, we're grateful you're here. It's 4 o'clock on a Friday. You could be anywhere in the world, but you chose to spend your time here, and we are grateful for that. So I'm Phil Clark. I'm an associate professor at Wake Forest University in the Department of Counseling. And when I'm talking about opening the door, um, we have some motivations in this work. And one is that we know that there's a lack of mental health providers to serve older adult clients. And number two, we are finding anecdotally and empirically that um, while there seems to be a decent amount of services for older adults in the physical domain of wellness, um, there doesn't seem to be as much out there services related to holistic wellness. So above and beyond just that physical domain. So our goal with the wellness program we're going to talk about today was to, number one, increase access to wellness and mental health support for older adults, but more specifically, increasing access to holistic wellness. And now we're talking about a community engaged program as well. So we had two kind of community or collaboration touch points. One is with the older adult senior living residents that we provided the program for, and two is for the staff members of those senior living communities who we trained in wellness coaching and went on to go ahead and implement the program that we're going to talk about. So we hope that we're going to use our program as an example of a wellness community engaged program that will hopefully give you ideas for your own work. So I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves and we're going to get going.
Hey, I'm Matt. I'm at Virginia Tech. Wish I could be there with you all in person, but I guess this is what we'll have to work with. Excited to talk about our topic and our study.
I'm Regina McCoy from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. I'm a full professor there, and I am excited to be a part of this team and for us to be opening this door for you for older adult wellness.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Smith from Mather Institute. I'm director of research there. And I thought I'd start out by telling you a little bit about Mather because it's kind of it has a unique setup. So we have 3 areas of service. The first one is our senior living residences. We have 2 life plan communities. Those are sometimes also called CCRCs. They offer a continuum of care. So people tend to move into them, move into independent living. And then as their needs progress, they may move into assisted living or skilled nursing. Our second area focuses on community initiatives for the broader Chicagoland area for the most part to increase connection and engagement among older adults. And our third area is our research institute. So we focus on applied research aimed at supporting older adults and aging service providers. So mainly focus on topics like resilience, positive aging, and wellness. And so we often collaborate with researchers, university partners. We started collaborating with Virginia Tech and Wake Forest in 2019 on wellness coaching. We conducted an initial survey to gauge interest in wellness coaching, in participating in a wellness coaching program. And we also wanted to understand more about barriers and motivations for participation in wellness programs. So we conducted the survey in October 2019. It was pre-pandemic. And we recruited residents from 10 life plan communities. And they were all in independent living at the time. So there were 447 resident participants. Average age was 82, and you could see the demographics on the screen, predominantly white, 2/3 female. And we also collected some data from staff members and did some follow-up interviews, but I'll mainly be talking about the resident survey results here. So moving to the next slide, we asked residents to rate themselves on different aspects of holistic wellness. And as you can see from the chart, residents tended to report generally high levels of self-reported wellness kind of across the board. It was particularly high for items related to contextual wellness. That's their financial resources, their it's the living environment that they're in. And we also saw high scores related to maintaining meaningful relationships and pursuing meaningful experiences. We saw more variability at the bottom of the chart on items related to spiritual wellness, perceptions of aging, and having a life calling. So because these self-reported wellness scores are so high, one thing that we've been trying to do is to shape residents' conceptions of wellness, because sometimes we hear, oh, I don't need wellness coaching because I'm already well. So we're trying to communicate that you can keep working on your wellness no matter where you are on the continuum. You can continue to learn and grow and continue maintaining your wellness as well. In terms of how interested they are in improving their wellness, overall residents, they're interested in pretty much all of the areas. It was particularly high for physical wellness, financial well-being, and having personal control over their life. Items where it was more mixed related to spirituality. So you can see 25% said that they're extremely interested in improving their spiritual wellness. About 20% were not interested at all. So we're finding that residents are conflating spirituality and religiosity. And so it can be a polarizing topic for some people. So there's a need to establish a shared meaning, common ground related to what spirituality means. And then just to provide a little bit more context about life plan communities, they typically offer a range of wellness-related amenities like fitness centers, pools, libraries, art studios, maybe gardens or walking paths. Some communities have chapels on site. Non-denominational communities may either help arrange transportation for residents to off-site places of worship or bring spiritual leaders on site. There are also wellness programs offered throughout the day. They tend to be physical wellness programs. Residents participate in those a lot. Programs like emotional or vocational wellness tend to be offered less frequently. And so this chart here shows how frequently residents are participating in different types of wellness programs. You can see that the physical wellness participation is really high, and the emotional wellness program is low. It's partly due to lack of available programs, but we also hear from some staff members that there's less demand from those programs. So our interviews and the survey data are suggesting that there's a subset of participants, of residents, who are very interested and could benefit from more emotional wellness programming. So we think that there's an area of opportunity for the communities there. And then just to gain a greater sense of motivators, we asked participants about factors that could influence their participation or their decision to participate in wellness programs. And quality of the programs and interest in the topic were the highest areas. Social factors, like whether they knew the participants, those tended to be lower down. And then we also wanted to understand what factors may prevent participants from participating in wellness programs offered at the senior living community. And really, we found that there are very few barriers. The main barrier is that the residents feel that they're getting their wellness needs met elsewhere or in different ways, or maybe they don't feel that the program is a good fit for them. So there are a lot of different kind of wellness activities available within the life plan community and the surrounding areas. So staff members have to coordinate between the different types of wellness offerings so the programs don't compete. And so they need to kind of balance amount of interest, room scheduling, staff availability, staff schedules, resident schedules. So they kind of coordinate all of that information. And then last but not least, we asked residents about their interest in wellness coaching. And so 40% said that they're extremely or moderately likely to try wellness coaching. A similar percent said that they were likely to recommend it to someone else of their community. And 51% reported it was extremely or moderately likely that they would benefit from wellness coaching. And just in terms of the program design. Residents tended to prefer a program that was either led by staff members or a counseling or healthcare professional. They liked the idea of meeting once a week for a wellness coaching session for 30 to 60 minutes, and they preferred high-touch program designs. They said they're more likely to participate in individual or small group programs rather than larger wellness coaching sessions. So that was a quick overview, and I will hand things over to Matt for the theoretical framework.
So, now that we have this initial data to kind of inform the program development, we worked closely across universities and with the Mather Institute to really start to develop a program based on what we felt like the residents and the staff members were telling us. Phil will share a little bit more about some of the details of the program, but I'm going to go into kind of the theoretical framework that guides how we think about older adults' wellness. As you saw from the data that Jenny shared, there appears to still be some assumptions that wellness is primarily a physical enterprise as opposed to something more holistic. And, something like wellness coaching has a very specific kind of connotation to it. And we weren't quite sure how people would respond to that. So we felt like the fact that 40% were interested in trying that, were very interested, was really promising. So as we dug into kind of our shared ideas around how to define wellness, how to make a wellness coaching program come to life, we started looking at some of the key theoretical frameworks that would guide our work. And you'll see here in the blue 3 primary frameworks, one of which is self-determination theory, socioecological theory, and then the 8 dimensions of wellness in older adulthood. And then I included in the white boxes here just some additional values, things that really inform what we see wellness coaches and wellness counselors doing in other domains, not necessarily unique to older adulthood, but important nonetheless. So a focus on strengths and resilience, a focus on motivational interviewing, and this notion, as Jenny alluded to, that we don't have to wait until we're solving problems to be able to promote wellness. We can really help people think about thriving and enhancing the good things in their life, salutogenesis being kind of the fancy term for that. On the next slide, what we just want to highlight here is how the self-determination and socio-ecological theories fit together. So self-determination theory suggests that the 3 basic psychological needs for all people include autonomy, achievement, and affiliation. This theory has been used quite a bit with younger populations. We were excited to see how it might be applied with an older adult population. And the Mather Institute has really done a marvelous job of leading the aging industry as it thinks through how to promote holistic wellness for this population. And then socioecological theory, I know that Julie Williams has a particular affinity for this. The individual, community, and society layers to any sort of approach. We don't want to just think about this kind of disconnected individual organism. We really have to think about their community and how it shapes their needs and their interests, as well as the broader society. So we wanted to start with that as kind of our guiding principles for how to think about wellness. And then on the next slide, what you'll see is that we kind of operationalize these things. So this will be in the slide deck if anyone wants to dig in to self-determination theory, socioecological theory. But there are some good working definitions that we incorporated into our training manual that all of our resident wellness coaches were later provided with. On the next slide then, you'll see the dimensions of wellness in older adulthood that we use to kind of, in our recipe for developing a wellness coaching program, we wanted to make sure that we were covering all of these different ways to consider what it means to be well. A lot of the research on holistic wellness that's out there, a lot of the programs that are developed tend to steer toward college-age populations or working-age populations. And so there really is kind of a dearth of programs and research supporting what are the distinctive things about older adulthood when it comes to wellness? So we used some existing research reflected here to help us think about what are the different domains, the different dimensions that we might want to draw attention to as older people are thinking about their wellness, particularly as an antidote to this notion that wellness is primarily about my physical self. While physical wellness is incredibly important across the lifespan, we do know that older people have holistic needs, and so this dimensional approach allows us to continue to reflect that back to the person who's involved. That physical wellness is a part of the equation, but there's a lot more to what it means to be well that we also want you to think about. Not for the sake of time, not going to spend much time getting into each of these, but I will just kind of read these off and do a very brief summary, and Phil can advance the slides as we go here. So developmental wellness, we're really thinking about how I approach the aging process, what it means to be an older person, what it means to be a person in a larger societal framework who is aging. We know that American society has certain assumptions about what it means to age, and that many people internalize those values. We see physical wellness, which has kind of a distinctiveness related to diet and exercise, how we care for the body regardless of what state the body might be in. Emotional wellness, which, as Jenny alluded to, is sometimes under-programmed in these life plan communities, trying to focus on our cognitive, our emotional well-being, things like resilience, maintaining hope. Relational wellness, oftentimes described as social wellness in other contexts, but really thinking about the reciprocal need for meaningful relationships, not only receiving but also giving to other relationships, and the way that informs aging successfully. Contextual wellness, which our samples seem to think was pretty high, but the way that our environment, the way that finances, the way that other resources that we might have contributes to our experience of aging. Vocational wellness, that search for meaning, that search for a sense of calling. Oftentimes in wellness models, you'll see occupational wellness, but when you're working with an older adult population, I think it's important to reframe that notion that our sense of calling doesn't stop at the point of ceasing to have an occupation. And oftentimes the need to have a purpose, the need to have a calling is something that is really lifelong. And so by changing the terminology and sort of reframing this as something about, the search for and the journey toward having meaning and having this sense of calling in older adulthood is really, prioritized here. Spiritual wellness, as Jenny described, one that maybe is a bit more controversial or just has different meanings attached to it. But really this is about looking to coping, whether it's through religion and faith communities, but also through other ways of defining spirituality, and participating in communities of like-minded people where social support that is connected to faith spirituality can be supported. And then cognitive wellness, looking at things, again, resilience kind of cuts across both emotional and cognitive resilience, but the need for control over our circumstances, self-efficacy, and also the pursuit of lifelong brain health and learning as a way to continue to feel engaged in the lives that we live and continue to feel like I'm working toward whatever that future self I want to look like might be. I'm going to hand things over to Phil now, but hopefully that gives you a nice understanding of the way that we were operationalizing wellness in this program.
Thanks, Matt. And so as we're going along, I'm thinking a couple things. One, you may be wondering why we're using the term wellness coaching when you all out there and many of us who are presenting are counselors. And part of that is based on the community engaged piece. Jenny was talking about, so we don't just quote unquote do something to, or implement an approach to someone, but alongside someone and informed by what their needs are and desires are. So Jenny really articulated, we try to find out what's important to residents, what wellness needs are met, what kind of modalities would they be interested in receiving some wellness support. And so out of that, with those staff preference for staff providing this intervention, we can't have staff members who are not counselors providing counseling. And so that's part of the reason why you hear the term wellness coaching, in case you're wondering why. And that's tied in, again, that community engaged piece. We are kind of informed by the residents and what they wanted. They didn't necessarily want counselors or clinicians, but they were really excited about having staff members provide some of those services. Another thing as you're going along is be doing some thinking about, what does this information mean to you? Where do you want to leave your mark in terms of increasing access to older adult wellness and making sure that you're facilitating holistic programming? So I'm going to talk a little bit about our curriculum, and we have, and this is currently in process. So we've done one cycle of 9-week program, and we've just started our second cycle of 9-week programming with new residents across several senior living communities. So we have a 9-week program. We wanted to make sure the program was long enough to have an impact that was meaningful on the residents' wellness. We decided to do both group coaching and individual coaching modalities. We thought that, I'll talk a little bit about each, but we thought each would have their own unique benefit on the residents' wellness. And part of what was informed by the research that Jenny talked about, that we've all participated on as a research team, they didn't, we as counselors sometimes think, oh, usually a group should be about 90 minutes or so. The residents, the older adults that we surveyed, they got stuff to do. They thought that over 60 minutes was too long. And so they wanted somewhere around 60 minutes for a group. So we tried to really honor that. So what was the purpose of this coaching? So as you're thinking about your own programming or approaches you might want to consider in your work with older adults, as Matt talked about, you want to consider the theory and what wellness approaches and theories you want to utilize. Matt articulated those. We wanted to dig down. So how can we bring out the SDT? How can we incorporate the older adult wellness research that Matt and others have done? And so we know from group counseling, we wanted that group modality for that social support. We wanted to provide education on these 8 domains that Matt talked about. And we wanted to hang our hat on a couple things. We know folks need to get involved in activities. They need to get their hands in the dirt and really be experiencing things. So we had a resident workbook where they do between group coaching session activities, and then they deconstruct those with their group, their fellow group coachees, so to speak. But we also felt like folks are going to want to dig into an individual wellness plan. To us, it's really difficult to have a wellness program without having the participants engage in their own wellness plan. And we thought we need some individual coaching sessions so that the residents can really dig in. Motivational interviewing really also is kind of part of the foundation of the skills that the coaches use. Again, the wellness coaches were the staff members who work at these different senior living communities. Counselors such as Matt or I were not delivering this approach. So you might want to think about with your own wellness program, is it you who wants to deliver the intervention? Is it someone else? Is it lay persons, other volunteers from the community? Who might you want to deliver this wellness programming? So again, just for purposes of brevity, we really hung our hat on bullet point 3 and 4. So giving them, the residents have week-to-week homework in a workbook that they each had, and they would talk about the results of some of these activities. I'll give you a short example of an activity in a moment. And each resident in their individual coaching session with the staff member made their own individual wellness plans as well. So just in brief, the wellness plan included goals. You can't have a broad goal without some specific action steps. We use some of that motivational interviewing piece to draw on that intrinsic motivation to change. And of course, as a wellness and a strength-based approach, we built on their strengths, resources, and build in some pieces of the wellness plan for them to creatively problem solve any barriers. So here you'll see an example straight from our resident workbook that the residents would have actually in their hands, facilitated by the staff coaches. And so as you can see, it's, based on the relational wellness piece. And so really neat, this is just a little portion of this activity. This is just a snippet where they're learning there's different types of social support, and they can identify specifically who are the people who support me, what ways do I benefit from that support, and then that helps me identify in what ways what unmet needs might I have in terms of my relational wellness. Again, this is just, there's a lot more processing and activity that goes along with this, but this is just the intro part of an activity, so you have a little sample of that. The last thing is, again, you can't be community engaged without being informed by the folks that you're collaborating with. Again, our two primary community touch points were the residents themselves, but also the staff members who were the wellness coaches. And so we have these consultation meetings every week with our wellness coaches that Regina will talk about in just a moment. And we try to really listen and get feedback. What are the coaches hearing from the residents? What's going well? What's going not so well? And listening to the coaches who are the staff members themselves in these senior living communities. What's helpful, what's not helpful, and that sort of thing. So we started hearing things like folks are having trouble reading the workbook. The font size is not big enough. Increasing the font size. Again, this is also about cultural responsiveness. This us not, just trying to, maybe having a blind spot and not considering these things, and then also trying to be as responsive as we could when these needs were brought to our attention. Developing an audio version of the workbook. And some folks had different levels of cognitive impairment, and so trying to find different ways to pare down the workbook so it's accessible for all. I'm going to diverge a little bit. This isn't directly about community engagement, but one thing you'll want to consider in the programming that you all and as the audience members do is making sure your program gets implemented in the way that you want it to be. And so we developed a really clear manual for all the wellness coaches with literal scripts, word by word, of when you do a group coaching session, start by saying this, then say this, then do this activity, because you want some fidelity to the approach to know that the approach actually works, to have a foundation point. We also had weekly checklists that when the coach is done with the session, a checklist of tasks they should have done during the coaching session, and they go through that checklist and we get access to those so we can see, are folks adhering to what they're supposed to be doing, or are they not? And do we need to change the programming because we've not done something that's getting in the way of the coaches being able to do what they're wanting to do or they're supposed to do during the coaching session. I'm now going to turn things over to an actual wellness coach, Regina McCoy, who really has led our training of the staff members who are our wellness coaches.
Yes, thank you, Phil. This has been exciting for me because I remember as being early in my days of trying to develop programs that we never see things from the beginning, which is what Jenny talked about, that data, right? How that data informed how Matt brought this program together with Phil, and really identifying how do you get that program fidelity, right? So how do you make sure you know what you want to measure? We put it into place, and now we've got to train the coaches because they're the ones that you're turning your program over to. So you can see here that we've got some areas that in the training piece, since I am a director of a health and wellness coaching program at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, I really felt it was important that we start from the beginning, which is community. And you've already heard everyone speak about how community was very important. I'm going to give you some examples of that, how we fostered that collaboration, how we also optimize motivation and sustainability for this program, but really for the persistence of the coaches because they wore multiple hats as they're going through the training as well. We use this experiential design or really a universal design to remember that our coaches are also people who are engaging with this information and it's changing their lives as well. So as we're training them, we're also answering questions for them in regards to their personal wellness and how they're relating to these domains and these dimensions, but also then, oh my goodness, I have to go back and train and teach, and I'm an art therapist. How does that work out? That's where I come in. Health coaching has been around for a while. I am not a counselor, so it was easy for me to say, coaching is about helping someone reach their goals, their self-directed goals. We're not going to try and tell people what to do. We're going to give them the information they need so that they can go and make their own, be advocates for themselves. And so using that self-determination theory was so easy because it's something that health coaching has been founded on. So we do that with positive self-regard. We make sure that we are honoring the residents' capacity for change. And I brought in the fact that you got to be an ally. And we have seen allyship in so many levels. So we're going to go to the next slide so I can talk a little bit about that. First, we fostered community. And that began with us giving some bios about ourselves. And this was doing this in a different way. It's not just saying, hey, this is the introduction, this is what I do, and I have this long list of all the things that I have worked hard towards. We try to relate to them as well and let our staff, coaches know this is where we come from. This is what we're passionate about. And we asked them to do the same. So they gave us their bios. They told us a little bit more about them. For privacy, of course, we're not going to show you what their bios look like, but we want you to know that they were amazing. These 15 people range from being art therapists to fitness coordinators to life enrichment managers. Some of them were nurses, and several of them were activities managers. So we can't just say that some were lay workers. Many of them already had these professional skills that were associated with the scope of practice. So now they're adding coaching into their skills, right? But that also meant that they had to deconstruct some things that they were used to doing in certain ways. So our next slide, you'll see that we started thinking about that from the beginning. Our training manual for the 9-week resident program was really a training for the coaches in 6 weeks. And this 6 weeks was intense because we met with them through Zoom. We had 2.5 hour sessions. And it's really a conversational process. We integrated experience and concepts with their observations and then into their practice. There's new knowledge and concepts around coaching. So we had to take in consideration what their knowledge was, not just from their own profession, but also they had knowledge about their residents, and their residents that they work with, they knew them, they know them, they really are, they honor them. And so we had to leverage that knowledge and experience with also the goals of the program, but also the goals of what we believe to be wellness coaching. So from that, we had in our training manual, fundamental individual and group coaching skills. We also talked about group coaching expectations and the challenges to that, because again, as a nurse or art therapist, right, the nurse may not have done group coaching or group sessions, but the art therapist has. So we're trying to find a common ground for everyone to work from. We also had observations. We provided scripts in our training manuals for them to practice so they could role model some of these pieces. And then we also had a lot of practice. And that practice really took much of our time in smaller breakout rooms. And these were low risk practice. And in my field, we call them low risk, where they're just learning amongst each other. We're not using a rubric. We're not really giving feedback. We're just playing. I call that the playground. But then we had the higher risk as we got closer to week 3, 4, and 5, where they're now getting some feedback from us. And it's really been integrated and gradual. So next, you'll see that we had on the a step-by-step guide for the coaches. And that's where we tried to optimize and maintain this persistence, right? So they've got the PowerPoints. We didn't rely a lot on PowerPoints. PowerPoints are overstated in some ways because we had these great manuals. We had a coach companion manual that gave them the step-by-step. We had the training manual that helped them to understand and dig deeper. Then when we got into our sessions, we really were all about exploring, focusing in on those key skills, making sure that we grounded them and some really performance metrics and how to really reach that performance that we are comfortable with, but also that they would be comfortable with. And that took practice. So the fitness trainer, right, is comfortable with that one-on-one, may even be comfortable with that group session. But what happens when that fitness trainer now has to facilitate a session on spiritual wellness? And we keep bringing that up because in our consultation sessions, we have found our residents had a tough time with that. So if the residents are feeling kind of like, wait a minute, are you telling me I must read the Bible? What is that? Now you got this new coach who is saying, I didn't say that. It's not in the training manual, is it? No, it's not, right? It becomes this place of, is this really a challenge? No, it's a conversation. So we help them to work through those conversations so that the group took ownership of the group and the coach was there to facilitate that process. So on the next slide, you'll see that we have multiple means of engagement, and we just wanted to give you a few examples. And so I won't go into a lot of them because I'm the tail end of the session, but one of these are activities where we really focused in on ethics. All of our activities had a different, we wanted to make sure there was some content or skill associated with that, but we spent time in our in our training to discuss a few of them that we felt that really were heavy hitters, and ethics would be one example. So you'll see this in the slides later in your resource section where you can see how we did that piece. And another activity on the next slide is peeling the onion. And in counseling, I'm sure you've done this several times in your training. Also, as a health educator, we do this as we're practicing with really focusing in on those key active listening skills for coaches. And so this was just one of those activities where we tried to make sure that we highlighted what the key skills are. We went into groups, maybe they were 2 to 3, sometimes 4 coaches and staff coaches. And then we also had a key coach trainer with them in that session. And so we played around with it. And then as we got closer to weeks 4, 5, and 6, we would give even more feedback. And we actually found that the group gave the best feedback many times, and we could sit back and facilitate that. Another example on the next slide here is that you'll see that we also gave group demonstration. And so this is a video that you can go later and see in YouTube. We won't play it for you here because we don't have as much time, but we demonstrated coaching. That is key. Role playing, I know you've done it in all of your trainings, and sometimes it can feel a little odd, but we let them know we're being authentic in the role. No, I am not a 65-year-old, but as a 51-year-old woman, I can imagine what these dimensions mean to me. I can imagine me going through that process. And so some of the staff would role play that. We were also able, I was very fortunate to role play with some of the coach staff as well from the retirement community. The next section that we did, or next activity, is also group session practice. And we had them practice the sessions. At first they thought, wait a minute, well, I can read it, I can go on my own and practice it, but you know how observational learning is. As they went through the session, we were able to see those sticky points. We were able to help them kind of just smooth some of those edges or walk through some areas. And the other thing is they were able to see how other staff coaches would implement this program too. If you're going to implement a program like this, it is very crucial that you have them go through your activities, go through your training, go through the program, because that's going to help you with program fidelity on the tail end. Now, the next thing we did, I think we talked about rubrics and skills checklist. And so we used rubrics that were inside of the training. So they knew what the expectations were. They also knew the components of what really was a part of the key skills that we were hoping that they would develop. We also use Qualtrics online so they can go in and do checklists after they finish their sessions. They could also go and say, hey, this is where I feel I am in this area of motivational interviewing skills, or my active listening skills, or my attending skills, things like that. Now, the last thing that we really just wanted to bring up that Phil already talked a little bit about is our consultation sessions. And these are still going on because we're in wave 2 now, and they have been critical because we're able to answer those just-in-time questions about implementation. Remember, they wear multiple hats. And so they may be a nurse just 15 minutes ago, and now they're moving into a wellness coach. Now, one thing that I found interesting is that as a nurse in some of these communities, they must address their residents as Mr. and Mrs. because there's that formality. That's something that is important in their residential community. But in the coaching program, they don't use those formalities. They're now my name. I'm the nurse, and this is my name, Regina, and you are John or Sue. So this was a different piece. We found those things in the consultation session. And how we processed that was to say, how does that feel? What does that look like now when you go back into your nursing role? One of the things we're currently working on is COVID restrictions. We already started the program with COVID restrictions. We knew how to work through that, but no one thought we'd have to go back, right? Here we are. And so in our consultation sessions, we talk about that. We reinforce our coaching skills. We bring more self-awareness to the fact of where you were at the beginning of the program to the implementation of the first round to now. And we've seen such tremendous growth, and that has just been so amazing for them to even feel that as well. They're very resilient coaches, and they really are counting on their skills and counting on our consultation sessions each week. Sometimes we have to kick them out because it runs a little longer. So we address their conflicts. We also make sure that we had some adaptations. And I think Phil talked about how we made the larger font. Well, another thing we did is we realized that there were some who had auditory concerns. And so we now made a audio book for our coach manual, for our, I'm sorry, residents workbook. So now all of us went in and we recorded the residents workbook just in real time. I think the key piece, if you're going to implement this, is those consultation sessions. We would not have picked up on some of those things until the end of the program. How much better and richer it is for us to find those now. So last piece, before we wrap this up today, is that there's just some key points, and I'll just do them really quickly in 30 seconds. It's a process. It's not something that's just going to be this outcome. When you think of this training that you develop, when you think of your program, it's living, it's breathing. We want to make sure that you know that people have real implementation fears and they want to do the best for us. And so we want to give them the tools to do that, but we also want them to see this as a place where they can have their own professional growth. Some of them have come out and said, I like this coaching aspect. Hey, maybe I may want to go on and become a coach, and we can give them resources on how to do that as well. Other pieces to stay, just keep empowering them and stay empowered and understand their unique roles, because their unique roles are going to help you see how to better position your program that you develop. We want you to also make sure that you inspire the engagement and connectedness. And we still do that. I miss some of the groups that I had in the training that I don't get to see, and some of them still reach out because we did a great job of creating this community that was really not just sharing, but it was also about caring. And last thing is avoid the one size fits all. Be flexible, y'all. If COVID has not taught us anything, flexibility is the one thing that we should definitely take from this time. So, Bill, I think it's you, right? You're going to wrap us up with the overarching thing.
I'm not going to say too much. We came pretty close to on time for our time. Thank y'all for hanging with us. This is just a final slide for your consideration on your own. Just some questions and reflection points. If you're considering developing some wellness programming for older adults, incorporating some creative ways, and it's just even your individual or group counseling with older adults, some questions for how can you open the door. It might be something helpful to go through as you're considering your own process. And hopefully you got some ideas of what to do and what not to do from us. We thank you for your time. I think we want to respect your time, so we'll wrap here, but I'm certain that we'll be fine with hanging around for a question or two if you do have those. But we'll formally wrap things up. Thank you so much for your time. We'll stick around for a question or two if you have one, or a comment as well.